The history of metal is a short, although very interesting one, and it's fascinating to see just how a genre of music has created so many different subcultures and has created communities for people who might have felt left out or misunderstood by their contemporaries. Beyond that, metal has given us some of the most intense and expressive music ever to be conceived. Of course, with a legacy as powerful as that of heavy metal, there are going to be countless amazing stories to tell, even though the genre has, comparatively speaking, existed for only a very short time. But there are just so many crazy stories to tell that I can't possibly get around to all of them in this video. In this video, however, I'll be diving into some of the most influential, some of the most notorious, and some of the most batshit insane stories related to metal. Some of these are real stories that, believe it or not, actually did happen. Some of these are just rumors, and some of them are crazy conspiracies, which I know the internet loves. The video is going to be structured after the Iceberg model, which you've probably seen floating around the internet recently. The basic idea is that the very tip of the iceberg is all the stuff that everybody already knows. All of the biggest bands and the general understanding of what heavy metal is. These are the things that people who don't necessarily listen to metal or participate in the metal communities might know about. And then as we descend deeper and deeper into the murky depths down towards the bottom of the iceberg, this is where the stories and the tales and conspiracies and rumors start to get really spicy. Just a quick disclaimer before I begin this video: while I won't be showing any explicitly graphic images, I will be discussing topics that will definitely get this video demonetized. So if you are easily offended, this is your warning. Metallica. I told you we were going to start with something everybody knows. Metallica is the biggest and most well-known metal band in the world. Even more well-known than Black Sabbath. I was surprised too, but here we are. Metallica is without a doubt one of the most influential metal bands in history. Not only because it serves as a gateway for the normies to get into metal through some of Metallica's more easily digestible songs, like Everything off the Black Album, but also because every single modern metal band is either directly inspired by Metallica or inspired by a different band, which is then in turn inspired by Metallica. Despite taking a massive hit to their popularity in the early to mid 2000s, but we'll get to that later, Metallica is still selling out stadiums across the world and seems to be having a blast. Metallica Megadeth drama. In 1983, lead guitarist Dave Mustaine was kicked out of Metallica after recording their debut album, Kill 'Em All. According to Metallica, this was because of Dave's alcoholism, drug abuse, overly aggressive behavior, and a couple of personal clashes with James Hetfield and Lars Ulrich. Personally, I just fucking love how alcoholism is a reason for them kicking him out. It's like, you know you've got a problem when the band formerly known as Alcoholica kicks you out because you drink too much. Mosh pits. Alright, so for this section I literally just wrote a bunch of sweaty dudes bumping into each other with the intention of elaborating on it later, but upon thinking more about it, mosh pits are a bunch of sweaty dudes bumping into each other. And of course you've got your variations. You've got the circle pit, which is a bunch of sweaty dudes running around in a circle bumping into each other, and you've got the wall of death, which is the most intense sweaty bumping. Basically, you've got the entire pit, split them into two sections, and right as the beat hits, everybody just runs towards each other and just slams into each other, creating this, well, wall of death. There are also niche types of mosh pits. For example, I went to see a British deathcore band a couple of years ago and we did a crawl of death, which was exactly what it sounds like. The Devil's Horns. Alright, so before we get into this one, I just want to clarify that this is metal and this is Spider-Man. Those are two very different things. There's been much debate as to the origins of the devil's horns, and of course Gene Simmons claims that he invented it, but personally I think that Ron James Dio has a very interesting story about them.
Both sides, both my mother's and father's side, came to America from Italy, and they had superstitions. And I would always see my grandmother when I was a little kid, with her holding my hand and walking down the street. She would see someone and go, "What's that?" And eventually learned that it was called the Maloik. And the Maloik was, someone was giving us the evil eye, so she's giving the protection against the evil eye. Or you can give someone the evil eye too.
Satanism. While metal and Satanism is not directly linked, a lot of old school hard rock and heavy metal musicians grew up in very Christian households, and to them using satanic imagery and lyrics were a sort of fuck you to the established norm. In the majority of cases, satanic imagery and lyricism is mainly used as shock value. But there are bands out there who are genuinely satanic, but we'll get back to that later. Death metal. Alright, so this is where all the non-metalheads just completely tap out. Death metal is so much more brutal than its predecessor, thrash metal. Actually, I don't know if death metal came before thrash metal, but this is where you start getting things like consistently growled vocals, really extreme lyrical themes, and heavily distorted guitars with tons of dissonance, and of course, blast beats. The best beats. Marilyn Manson and the Columbine High Massacre. When school shootings happen, American news are always super quick to blame any sort of unrelated piece of entertainment media. In current times, video games are the prime target for the boomers over at the various news stations, but back in the late 90s, rock music was considered the devil himself, and of course, when kids start shooting each other, what other reason could there be other than they were listening to Marilyn Manson? Makes perfect sense, right?
American news especially keys in on violence, and they're trying to promote, how wonderful American society is, and all they show is bloodbath at high school in Denver, and they use that as a byline for like 2-3 days, and they sucker a lot of people in. One of the lines we wrote a while back, it's in Disciple actually, is the beauty of death we all adore because TV sucks you in and makes you want to see more of it.
There are some early media reports that stated that they were even wearing Marilyn Manson t-shirts, although this turned out to just be fake news. But of course this didn't stop the media in printing stories like, let's see, I found some good ones earlier. Yeah, there we go. Killers worshipped rock freak Manson, and devil-worshipping maniac told kids to kill. Just wait till these guys learn about black metal. So yeah, all in all, just objective, classy news reporting. Saint Anger. While Metallica is still one of the biggest touring acts in the world, their 2003 album Saint Anger is infamous for various reasons. My personal favorite reason is of course the fabled Saint Anger snare, which has been featured prominently on this channel, which is basically just a poorly tuned and extremely poorly mixed snare drum with the snares disengaged. Apparently a lot of people are defending this decision by saying that a lot of grindcore uses the same snare sound, and to me that doesn't really sound like a compliment. There is so much wrong with this album, but there are also some pretty cool songs here and there, and say what you will about the snare drum and some of the other creative decisions, but at least they tried something new, and I respect them for that. And I unironically fucking love that meme snare. It is the best thing to ever happen to metal. The tritone. The tritone is a term used in music theory, and it refers to the augmented fourth or the diminished fifth. And this is at least one of the key components in making metal sound metal. In the Middle Ages, it was downright forbidden to play this music because it was believed to be the sound one would make to summon the beast, Ozzy and the Bat. In 1982, Ozzy Osbourne, the Prince of Darkness himself, bit the head right off a living bat on stage. There are a couple different versions of this story, but the most commonly believed one is that somehow a bat got into the crowd and was trampled, whereafter some guy picked it up and decided that it was a great idea to just kind of throw it up on stage. And Ozzy Osbourne, being about 80% cocaine at the time, thought it was an even better idea to pick this bat up and just kind of, just bite its head off. Ozzy Osbourne has stated that he thought it was a prop, a rubber bat or whatever, and he has assured everybody that the bat was dead at the time, but the guy who threw the bat has assured the opposite, that it was definitely still alive. Oh, wait a minute, this just in 2022, Ozzy even launched a collection of bat-themed NFTs. Because money. Black metal. If you thought death metal was brutal, you should meet its Norwegian cousin, black metal. The music is more dissonant, the production is nastier, and the lyrics are more extreme. This is where we get into some of the bands that are unironically satanic, and black metal is notorious for being the most controversial subgenre of metal. And we'll get into that in just a second. I would like to say, however, that despite what some documentaries might tell you, most black metal bands are not psychopaths. The Norwegian church burnings. That being said, here is a story about a bunch of psychopaths. From 1992 to 1996, over 50 Norwegian Christian churches were burned to the ground, and in every single case where the arson was actually solved, the perpetrator had connections to the underground Norwegian black metal scene. Of course, with all controversial and downright illegal and harmful behavior, most black metal bands are very much against arson and some of the other crimes we'll be getting into later. But there are a surprising amount of bands who are in deep support of these arsons. For example, here is Gal from the band Gorgoroth.
Church burnings and all these things are, of course, a thing that I support 100%, and it should have been done much more and will be done much more in the future.
In 2005, Gal was sentenced to 14 months in prison for torturing a man and collecting his blood in a cup. You know, like any other normal, well-adjusted human being. Ozzy is immortal. Given all the shit Ozzy Osbourne has been through, including, but not limited to, every single drug known to mankind in excessive amounts, the man should be dead. And of course, the internet being the internet, as we all know and love it, there are people out there genuinely speculated, not just for fun, but who genuinely believe that Ozzy Osbourne is in fact immortal. And I kinda hope they're right. Sabaton is military propaganda. There is a subsect of people who genuinely believe that the band Sabaton glorifies and promotes war because they write songs about the war, but of course writing a song, or in this case probably like 100 songs about something, doesn't necessarily mean that you're glorifying it. Especially taking into consideration that Sabaton's lyrics are generally more historically focused and just don't seem like a modern call to arms against whatever. Phil shot Dimebag. Dimebag Darrell, former guitarist of the band Pantera, was murdered in 2004 by a man named Nathan Gale. Dimebag was performing with his new band Damage Plan when Nathan brought a gun to the show and just killed a bunch of people, including Dimebag. And of course this led to speculation that Phil, the vocalist from Pantera, was actually the one who orchestrated everything because there was some bad blood between him and Dimebag, although there were no evidence to actually suggest that this is the case. Hidden pentagrams in the Doom soundtrack. Alright, so just a quick little public service announcement. If you haven't heard the soundtrack for the games Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal, definitely check it out. It is a metal masterpiece by Mick Gordon, the composer. And one of the songs has a very interesting Easter egg if you run it through a spectrogram. carats. So there's very limited information about this, but apparently in 1978, Aerosmith, who isn't really a metal band, but this is my video, so whatever, allegedly bought 1 metric ton of carrots. To this day, nobody knows why, nobody knows what they were used for, where they went, what happened. It's so fucking strange. The only thing I can find just vaguely relating to this is Steven Taylor, the vocalist, mentioning something about bringing a juicer on tour, but a metric ton of carrots is a ton of carrots. Seriously, if you know anything about this, please let me know in the comments, because I must know. I need this in my life. Mayhem album cover. Going back to black metal for a second, in 1992, the lead singer of the band Mayhem decided to commit suicide via shotgun blast to the head. Upon discovering his body, the guitarist Euronymous, instead of doing whatever you do when you find a corpse, Euronymous decided it was a great idea to go and get his camera and take a bunch of pictures of his recently deceased friend's corpse. Because black metal. He even went as far as to rearrange some of the items to make the photos more visually appealing. And one of the photographs even ended up as the cover art for an unofficial bootleg version of a live concert performed by Mayhem. However, this was not the work of Euronymous, because he was spending 1995 being dead. In 1993, Euronymous was killed, being stabbed over 20 times by a man named Varg Vikernes, who also burned down at least 4 churches, and who, while in court, openly declared his support for the Nazi ideology. But I'm getting way ahead of myself, because we'll get back to that later. Ozzy Osbourne is dead. Having seen Ozzy Osbourne perform live within the last couple of years with his band Black Sabbath, I can kinda see why some people might believe that Ozzy is actually dead. I mean, he certainly does move like a mummified corpse being puppeteered on strings. However, there are people out there who genuinely believe that Ozzy Osbourne is actually dead and is either being puppeteered, or that he's just straight up a hologram. Load album cover preserved. Metallica's 6th studio album, called Load, was released in 1996, and it featured a very special album cover. The cover art is an original piece by provocative artist Andrea Serrano, and it is called Blood and Semen 3, because Blood and Semen 1 and 2 just didn't quite have the Metallica effect they were going for. As the title suggests, the cover art depicts the artist Andrea's own semen mixed together with bovine blood. And it is rumored that the original piece of plexiglass with this mixture is still preserved out there somewhere. And the more you know about this artist, the more likely it is that it's actually true. Rammstein music video. In 2009, the German band Rammstein released a single leading up to their upcoming album Liebe ist für alle da. This single was called Pussy, and it featured a very special music video. Given the title of the song, you can probably guess at least some of the content of this video. It's porn. It's just straight up porn, featuring all of the band members. However, even though the video features the band members in compromising positions, the band has stated that they were using body doubles for some of the more intimate shots. Although Rammstein being Rammstein, you never know. As a matter of fact, there was even a limited edition 7-inch vinyl of this single in a very distinct Viagra blue color. Varg Vikernes. One of the most controversial and divisive musicians in the world of music is, without a doubt, the Norwegian black metal musician Varg Vikernes, known mainly for his crimes but also for his music in the one-man project Burzum. In 1994, Varg was sentenced to 21 years in prison, which is the maximum sentence in Norway. He was charged with first-degree murder on Euronymous, possession of 150 kilos of explosives, and at least 4 accounts of arson. Varg was released in 2009, whereafter he moved to France, because it was, quote-unquote, the last remaining racist country in Europe. In 2014, he was sentenced to 6 months in prison for glorifying war crimes and inciting violence against certain minority groups, especially Jews and Muslims. Furthermore, Varg was found to have connections with Norwegian mass murderer Anders Breivik, who was responsible for the deaths of 77 people, most of whom were children. Varg was allegedly planning a similar terrorist attack, but he was found not guilty due to lack of evidence, even though he is a convicted murderer, openly Nazi and racist, and he has just purchased 4 rifles. But no hard proof, so he is still a free man to this day, as far as I know. So yeah, arsonist, satanist, murderer, Nazi. You can see why this guy is controversial. The whole black metal rabbit hole goes much deeper than this, and I haven't even gotten around to mention DSBM or NSBM, but to be honest, I think we kinda get the point. And once again, I would like to clarify that the vast majority of black metal bands are not Nazis. They are not psychopaths, and they're not murderers, regardless of what the media would like you to think. The Lateralus Fibonacci sequence. And now for something that's not horribly depressing. Right, so in order to understand why this is actually significant, you need to understand the Fibonacci sequence. And high school being 10 years ago for me, I'm gonna do my best to explain the Fibonacci sequence from memory. The idea is that you take the current number and multiply it with the number that came before it. And as you start with the number 1, there is nothing before it. So you have 1 and 1 plus whatever is before it, which is in this case 0 because there is nothing, is 1. So you get 1, 1 as the beginning of the Fibonacci sequence. After that, you got the current number 1, add that to the previous number, which is also 1, and you get 2. Now you have 2. Add the previous number to that, which is 1. Now you got 3. 3 plus 2 is 5. 5 plus 3 is 8. And it just goes on like that. And it is related to the mathematical principle known as the golden circle, which is also prevalent in a bunch of Tool's work, because these guys are just a bunch of fucking nerds, apparently. So why is this important? You see, there is this song called Lateralus, and the amount of syllables in the verses actually follow the Fibonacci sequence in ascending and then descending order. So for the first verse, the syllables go 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, and then it descends on the Fibonacci sequence back into 5, 3. And for the next verse, the syllables are 13, 8, 5, 3. So also descending down the Fibonacci sequence, but from another point. And what's really interesting about this is that this particular sequence of numbers, this ascending and descending trip up and down the Fibonacci sequence, actually implies that there is a hidden verse, or at least a missing verse in between. I hope that makes sense. Body carving. If you think getting a tattoo of your favorite metal band isn't quite metal enough, oh boy do I have a stupid idea for you. You can take a red hot glowing knife and just fucking carve their logo into your flesh. This is a thing people do. Yes, there are pictures out there, and no, I'm not going to show them here. For some reason this is particularly popular among Slayer fans, although I can't say I'm surprised.
Like, no one goes, yeah, I was really big into Slayer one summer. You know, there's not, like, I've never met that guy. I've only met the guy who's got Slayer carved across his chest.
All right, everybody, that's it for this one. There are so many crazy stories and stupid stories in the world of metal. And I mean, I could sit here talking about it all day, but you know, the video's gotta end at some point. This video is 100% getting demonetized due to the insane nature of a lot of these topics. So if you want to support this channel, you can do so over at patreon.com/polarwhale. The link's in the description, and I'll see you in the next one.